This is my latest aquarium rack, and I get a lot of questions about the specific rack that I use and any products that I use to make it waterproof and stuff like that, so I decided to publish this video of how I put it all together to try and help other people looking to set up similar systems in their own fish room. I want to start with rack selection because this is important and it's commonly overlooked, and this is a rack I went with. It's sold under the RB Boss brand, available via Screwfix here in the UK, but honestly, any industrial shelving unit should work just as well, and there's similar options at B&Q if you are in the UK. I have used some more affordable racks that I found on Amazon for some of my other tanks, and while they do the job, they are nowhere near as sturdy as these industrial shelving units. So for only a small increase in price, you get a rack that's far more solid and far larger, allowing you to do a lot more with it. The main thing that I was looking for was load capacity, and this rack was rated for 450 kilos or around £1,000 per shelf. They are available in a variety of different widths and lengths and heights and things like that, and the one I went with is 120 centimeters long and it cost around £100. When planning this rack setup, I followed a rule of thumb that I first saw mentioned over on the Green Aqua channel, where you take the tank's volume in litres and then you double that to get an estimate of its weight in kilograms. Now this is a rough estimate, but it accounts for things like hardscapes, substrate, aquarium accessories and all of the water that you're going to put into the aquarium as you set it up. Because of the 450 kilogram load capacity, that means that in theory at least, these shelves can hold aquariums that are around 225 litres each, though I don't plan on using anything that big. I try to use smaller tanks but more of them on my shelves. For example, with this particular rack, two of my shelves have two 45 litre tanks, which is around 12 US gallons, while the other shelf has two 30-litre tanks, which is around 8 US gallons, along with one 25-litre tank, which is around 6.6 US gallons. So this is far below the actual maximum load capacity, but it just gives that extra stability for the tank and the actual racking system, and with the tanks on it, this is far more stable than my more affordable ones. Next up is rack location, and I had to clear out one corner of the room to fit this in, and I actually had to rip out an old wardrobe left over by a previous tenant. It had rotted against the wall, but this shouldn't be too much of a fix once I get everything out and I can get some treatment on there. When choosing this spot, I made sure that I had enough room for the rack as well as enough space for me to easily get behind it if needed. Being able to get behind the rack makes things a lot easier when it comes to plugging in new equipment, unplugging old equipment, doing little bits of maintenance and things like that. I've honestly lost count of how many times I've had issues with my other racks which sit flush against the wall just because I didn't have the space to physically get behind it myself. Now, leaving that additional space between the rack and the wall for you to get in there is optional, but personally I do plan to do it moving forward with all of my racks if I can do it, but space is at a premium with my current setup. So moving on, and we get to building the actual rack, and I wasn't actually looking forward to this bit, but in all honesty it was a lot easier than I first thought it would be. The instructions were very straightforward and clear, making the whole process very simple, and I got it built in no time. Technically there is another shelf that I could have attached to this, but I'm just using it as a spare because I wanted to make the height between each shelves bigger to make things easier for water changes. I use a simple bucket and siphon system for these tanks, and while it doesn't need that much room, if I did have that extra shelf installed on it, it would have been really tight and made things a little bit more difficult during maintenance getting my hands in there to trim plants and stuff like that. Moving on to actually painting the racks, and because of my current setup I did have to paint this rack in my current fish room with all of my other aquariums which are lidless, and I was worried about paint fumes and stuff like that potentially causing issues. So I created as much ventilation as possible, opening all of the windows and doors, and I lined up both of my tower fans that I used to cool my racks during the summer if needed towards the door just to try and get any fumes out of the room as fast as possible. Now, painting the rack is optional, but here in the UK it's very difficult to find one that isn't painted in bright colours due to health and safety reasons in warehouses where they just want the racks to stand out. And I'll be the first to admit I am not a good painter at all, but it turned out to be very straightforward and easy. I was using a quick drying paint that I linked to in the description that made things really simple because it dried fast, so I could go over it and apply multiple layers if needed. I chose a quick drying paint that I linked to in the description, but it really did dry quickly and there wasn't many fumes or any smells coming off it, so I'm not sure the actual ventilation or my initial worries were actually justified. Now I did make a mistake because when I was painting it I tried to save time and only paint the parts of the rack that would be visible from the front or the left hand side. But looking back, I honestly do think this was a mistake and I ended up having to go back and apply more paint to the rack when I viewed it from different angles, so it stretched everything out a lot more. If I just painted the full thing now during the setup, it would have saved a lot of time in the long run. Moving on, and we get to sealing, and one of the biggest mistakes that I made with my more affordable racks that I got from Amazon was not sealing the MDF shelves that came with them. Now I know that replacing the MDF shelves with plywood and sealing that would have been the best option, but that adds more time and cost to the project. So for this rack I decided to give an MDF sealing product a try. I was curious about how these would perform because I've seen a lot of mixed opinions online about them, with some people saying theirs worked well and others saying it did little to nothing even for the exact same product. I will link to the exact one that I used in the video description, but in all honesty I'm very surprised at how well it's performed, but keep in mind I am quite careful with my water changes and stuff like that, so while I have had some splashes, it's really not been that much water, but so far it's held up very well. Now this sealer does dry very quickly and it made it a bit of a pain to see which parts of the shelves I'd already applied the sealer to and which parts were left over, but I do think I got some pretty solid coverage and managed to cover the entire shelf. Again, I do think I made a potential mistake here, and if I could rewind time I would have applied 2 coats of the sealer, but again I haven't had any issues using just one, it's just more of a peace of mind thing. Now back when I built this rack a few months back, I couldn't find any of the spray-on versions of the MDF sealer in stock anywhere, but there are some out there that in theory at least would have made this process a little bit easier because you simply spray it on, but the brush applied version worked perfectly fine. So this is what the rack is looking like today. In the top right cycle is getting shrimp added today to deal with the algae build-up, and the bottom right tank is doing a dark start method, so there's nothing in there plant-wise yet, but other than that everything's going quite well. There are a few things that I would do slightly differently if I could start again with this rack though, and I do think it's important to reflect on this, especially so you can avoid any potential issues I made. Like I touched on earlier as well, I would have preferred to apply 2 coats of the sealer to each of the shelves, but I do think that's more of a peace of mind thing because I've had a few spills and it hasn't been an issue so far. The main thing that I would have done differently is just wait until I could get the actual rack size that I wanted. My first choice was a 160cm or 64-inch version of this rack, but back when I set this up the US-China tariff situation was causing problems even though I'm here in Europe, so that size rack wasn't in stock, and both Screwfix and B&Q couldn't tell me when they'd get it back in. So to get the project started I did go with a slightly smaller 120cm rack, and while I am happy with it, if I just waited a few more months, the 160cm ones are back in stock now. It's not a massive problem if I'm honest, and I can fit another 120cm rack to the left of this one, so overall I do get more space for my tanks anyway, but it's just one of those things to keep in mind. I have had some people ask me why I haven't added aquariums to the top shelf of this rack. This is 180cm tall, and while I am 6'4" or 194cm tall, it is still quite high to get decent coverage and get into the tanks easily for maintenance and stuff like that. On top of that, like I mentioned earlier, I do use the bucket and siphon system for my water changes, so I need somewhere above the tanks for the bucket to go so gravity will let the siphon work. I know that it looks a little bare, but I'm actually thinking of putting a bunch of houseplants on that top shelf anyway and leaving space for my trusty bucket so I can do the water changes without issue. Other than that though, I'm really happy with how this rack's turned out. It's far sturdier than my more affordable ones off Amazon where they wobble if you bump into it. If you bump into this one, it's more likely you're getting a bruise and that rack is not moving. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope it's been helpful and thanks for watching. Good luck with setting up your own aquarium racks. It really is an easy project and it's far more affordable than getting those aquascape and display units, which can be quite expensive and only seat one tank.